What's up, everybody? This is the ReAct Man here, and today I wanted to watch a video titled, What Happened to Halo Infinite? Now, you might think, oh, I've seen 100 videos like this, but this actually comes from Halo Pro Lucid, who I actually collabed with once in a video where I totally got the better of him. He was trash at the game. I can't even say that with a straight face. No, he's a legend. I met him a few times at the HCS tournaments, and I think now that Halo Infinite, they're kind of shuttering support for the game, and we have no idea what the future of Halo's multiplayer is going to be. It seems like the last bastion of strength that this franchise had, which was the competitive scene, is fizzling out. You know, Formal has been, last I saw, he was playing Black Ops 7. I'm not sure what Lucid has been playing, but yeah, overall, Halo as a series shockingly feels like it's in the weakest state it's ever been, which is crazy because that last HCS event was phenomenal. This is kind of something I've wanted to talk about for a while, how disappointing it is that all that ended and we just have no idea what the future holds. With that being said, don't forget to leave a like on this video and subscribe to Actman TV if you enjoyed this video, but more importantly, go subscribe to Lucid because he's a fantastic creator and I'm sure he would appreciate the support. All right, well, let's get into this. Insert coin. Insert microtransaction, please. Slip space. Invaders. That's cool. I like what he's doing with this so far. All the battlegrounds, all the fights. Also, that, like, retro Halo theme is kind of slaps. I appreciate good editing. This was nice.
All right, so that is
a hard cut to Lucid.
intro with the Infinite Arcade. Just wanted to pull you guys in a little bit.
Yeah, you did.
Show that to you guys in case you hadn't really noticed. What we are here for today, as you have already read in the title, is we're going to be talking about what Infinite did right and wrong. And I'm going to really be going back to the beginning, talking about everything in between, and of course, inevitably, the endpoint current day that we are at now. So
you could tell he's, I'd say, slightly less than thrilled, right?
To start off with, we're going to talk about I would say Infinite did a great job of going back to its Halo roots, especially visually. I think was the clearest indicator of one of the big markers that they were trying to reel people back in with just that Halo feel from the beginning.
That was a huge plus for the game. It signaled Halo is back. We heard you. You know, I don't think people might remember how contentious like the art design debates were and all that. But to see that OG art style, it really went a long way. And I think that that roped in that casual Halo audience that had been laying dormant for many years. Huge plus for Halo.
The campaign I thought was pretty heartfelt. I thought it had a really solid storyline and just I was actually honestly a bit of a fan of the open world aspect. I feel like it could give it some more replay value.
The open world was like, it was good the first time, but I only beat Halo Infinite once, the campaign. I started the second playthrough, but kind of lost interest. And I think the open world was decent for what it was, but it really, I mean, I think everybody expected a lot more. But like overall, the campaign was really pretty decent. I'd say it was pretty decent overall. I think my biggest complaint was just the fact that every single cutscene was like one long continuous shot, and that really, they really struggled with the presentation of the story because of that bizarre creative choice.
It kind of had that mixture of a little bit more openness, but still having some linear segments sort of tied in between, which I am personally okay with.
Also, yeah, the lack of like linear missions was a huge deterrent, and no mission replay. Oh boy, we don't have to go down that rabbit hole just yet.
I mean, there is always the argument to be made if you know, if they dialed in just the linear gameplay specifically, things would have been even better. I feel like that, to be honest though, that kind of argument for me is in the same vein of like, if this game was just a $60 game, everything would be better. And I don't know if that's necessarily the case. Maybe it could be, but
I feel like you can always run into these hypotheticals, like with pretty much any game that fails to meet expectations or doesn't succeed at a level that is expected of it, right? Well, if it did this, well, if it did that, well, if they had this. And it is fun to like speculate on that. I think the problem with like Halo Infinite's campaign is that it felt like both the linear missions and the open world were only like 50% complete. I mean, there was that that report that Joe Staten was the one who ensured that you could buddy up with Marines and drive around in a Warthog, you know, across the installation. So imagine if it didn't even have that. That would have been crazy. But I think, yeah, it feels like Halo Infinite was a game designed by two completely separate teams trying to achieve two completely different things.
I don't personally think it is, but either way, I thought the campaign was pretty well received. Played every campaign for every Halo, and definitely not, you know, the peak, but it is not, I would say, Halo 5 levels of campaign.
It was 343's best campaign. I would 100% say that. Halo Wars 2 was also pretty damn good, but I don't think they had much involvement in that.
In terms of bottom of the barrel, if I'm being completely honest. So
I also, side note, for the campaign, I think people expected that to also be part of the live service or like something else PvE related, and they just never updated the campaign. I think the only update they added was to remove like some elephant gun, tank scorpion gun glitch and nothing else. So, you know, the campaign and the PvE section of the player base really didn't have anything to keep them going.
I thought it was a very, maybe even safe option, but I felt like the safe option was good, alongside, again, a lot of promise and
a lot of, okay, sorry, I gotta stop interrupting, but also they never like this is just yet another campaign / story that 343 is going to be abandoning the storyline for, because we never figured out what the endless were or are. Maybe they'll write it in a book, but you know, it left the seeds for a sequel or for DLC or an expansion, much like how Halo Wars 2 had a Awakening the Nightmare expansion, and we just never got that, never got any indication of it. So that retroactively kind of soured the taste on Halo Infinite's campaign, I think, for sure.
One thing they did right as well was some of the seasonal story developments that they had, especially at the beginning again, that completely tapered off, and they kind of killed the support for that. I believe it was in the middle of year 2 in like 2023.
Yeah, they had all those like mini cutscene story season updates, and then they just like completely abandoned that idea. It felt like right away they were cutting corners immediately after the game launched.
I want to say they had these like campaign level cinematics of kind of like a developing multiplayer story to kind of tie in, and I really liked what they were doing. Honestly, I thought the storylines were getting a little interesting, and they just weren't able to, you know, follow through and expand on it as much as they probably wanted to.
I feel like that's basically how 343 has run Halo over the last 15 years. It's, well, this has potential. Are you going to expand on it? Nope. I don't think the multiplayer cutscenes were all that great or intriguing, but like, I kind of assumed they would build up to something, and then they just stopped making them, and there was, like, it felt like there was no point.
Infinite had a great start. Honestly, I feel like it had a really good foundation. It had good bones, and the follow-through of what came after really was pretty limiting.
Yeah, that's a very kind way to put it. You know, the game launched, it basically shadow dropped the multiplayer to the tune of 256,000 players on Steam, at least. So it hit, they got that mainstream audience for sure that they had been chasing for so many years, but it became immediately apparent that cracks in the game were there, like, from day one. But what they showed people had enough promise that over 256,000 people tried it on Steam, a platform which had never had a Halo game launch on it day one, and that was huge. I think that was a positive takeaway. But as was demonstrated by the complete lack of features, like no Slayer playlist, it couldn't retain those players because it didn't have the muscles of a Halo game. It had the bones, but no muscles, and you need muscles to move a skeleton. And also, I remember trying to make my own custom game the night Halo Infinite came out after streaming for 5 hours, and I was so excited to like come up with this wacky game mode. And I spent like hours trying to save it, and custom games were broken day one. So I never went back to like play custom games because I never knew if those modes had been fixed or not.
Or they limited themselves for whatever reason, ultimately, in the future. At the time, multiplayer was in the same boat. It was just lacking the content. The multiplayer launch, I feel like everyone, especially people who hadn't been in Halo and had come back to Halo with Halo Infinite, really felt that the game had hit a point that they...
I do find it funny he's playing like clips from some guy named Hudless Harry when like Lucid probably has so many fucking amazing plays and clips. It is a funny choice of B-roll, but...
We're very excited. A lot of people were very excited with the beginning jump off point, but it quickly fell off whenever, especially for multiplayer, when it was riddled with issues, especially from the beginning. And 343 at the time took their winter break for quite a while, and the game was left in a pretty sorry state for quite some time. I think BTB had dropped in December, and it was busted for like a month or months on end.
That was one of the biggest mistakes I think they made. Like, yes, for those that don't remember, they like released an update and then Big Team Battle broke, like you straight up couldn't find a match. And then they went on holiday and didn't fix it until a month later. And yeah, you should be able to enjoy the Christmas holidays with your family, like obviously. You also have a duty to your customers and your audience to like you needed to make BTB work before Christmas. Like that's just it. I mean, that just reflects on the quality of the product. Like, you know, you're supposed to put the work in so you can then enjoy your vacation.
And it just took them a while to really just jump at the opportunity to really keep the game healthy and keep the people engaged that had been fiending and still even are fiending for Halo content.
Yeah, and that was like kind of a sign of things to come. Like, BTB's broken, we're gonna wait a month to fix it. And so what do you do if all you play is BTB? Do you just wait a month, or do you play another game? Do you get hooked into that other game? And so like moments like that are make it real easy for you know, just regular gamers to jump ship and play something else.
And the playlists were very limited. Sandbox was reduced. There was like added elements with new Sandbox items, which was great, but there was also a reduction of like classic iconic things. Obviously certain iconic things came back, like the energy sword, the BR, gravity hammer, like those types, AR, like those.
I always found it perplexing that 343's best vehicle that they created was never added to Infinite. Where is the Mantis? What happened to the Mantis? That was like one of the only things in Halo 4. That was probably the only thing about Halo 4 that actually looked like Halo. Like Bungie could have made it. And for some inexplicable reason, it wasn't in Infinite. It's also a bigger problem when even like the good ideas and the concepts that 343 previously came up with, like there's no carryover. They don't reuse their good ideas and iterate on them. It's like every single game feels like it's a completely brand new, built from scratch experience, and it doesn't need to be.
Those types of weapons that are very, you know, just synonymous with like the Halo vision, the idea of what you think of like the classic Halo at this point in the current era. And obviously those came back, but there was, you know, just more. People just wanted, this is great, what we have right here is great, but we need more. We need more maps, we need more playlists, more of that good stuff that they were actually outputting. And that mark was just really not being met.
I don't think it ever was, and that's the thing with the modern gaming audience, is that they're like a dog, you know? They need to be fed at certain times of the day, right? And if they don't get enough food, they're gonna find a new owner. I don't know what this analogy is, but you get what I'm saying.
Now, I'm also going to talk a little bit more of just the multiplayer specific stuff here for a little while, and this is again what I think they did personally right. From the beginning, the comp health and how big of an emphasis they had on competitive, at least from...
Yeah, hold on. Take a look at this.
Personally right. From the beginning, the comp health and how
Even like a month after launch, like Raleigh popped off. I went to that one. That was fucking awesome. You know, despite the troubles the game had, that was a fantastic way to launch the game in a competitive scene. And I also went to Kansas City, and I went to, I think, every world championship. And so they killed it with the competitive scene, and supporting that and promoting it. And so that's why this video in particular is so interesting, and why I can't wait to hear what he says, because Lucid was a part of this, like the strongest part of Infinite, and now that too has faded away into the ether.
how big of an emphasis they had on competitive, at least from, I wouldn't even necessarily say it's just the studio, it really was HCS becoming its own thing alongside, you know, hopefully the game, the developers as a whole, the studio is going to keep the game nice and healthy.
Yeah, and you can see, you know, I've talked about this plenty of times in the past, but like Halo is strong. Halo is a franchise built off of like many pillars, and you know, properly supporting each part of the structure can you know, give you an incredibly solid foundation, right? But I think it's pretty obvious now that the competitive side of Halo was the most supported, and other areas did not receive the same level of love, care, and attention.
And HCS is doing its thing. It's banging because everyone was ready. Everyone was excited. The competitions, and Raleigh, one of the first tournaments immediately in December of 2021, was just it was just a banger. People were so excited. And I mean, even just the rest of that year going into 2022.
That's also besides the fact that at Raleigh, they had massive tech issues. Like, they had to restart so many sets. And I remember being like, oh my fucking God. But as far as viewers went, like, there were that was huge to start off with. And that's despite the fact that there were so many tech issues.
For the first season. And even honestly 2023, but especially 2022, when the hope was really high and the novelty of a new Halo game had just been in full force. I think HCS set itself up with the organizations, the bundles, the support system that they're creating, was really just hitting the mark.
It was. I mean, you like your team, buy your team's skin and represent them in the game. They'll show, you know, Optic plays in these tournaments with Optic skins. Like, this was a smart way to interconnect the average player with the competitive player. And yeah, it's like they didn't put the same amount of thought into every other aspect of the game, right? Just as a quick example, like, I don't think they ever added skins for any of the banished weapons or vehicles. I still to this day do not know why. Do you like the banished? Too bad. No cosmetics for you.
And I will give a shout out, sidetrack of talking about HCS as a whole, is I do really still appreciate
Love the cat.
HCS and what they do for the competitive community and what they put on. I think they, as well as alongside the studio, have shortcomings on things that they just need to dial in and do better. But just the fact that they support the scene, I feel like HCS was a absolute gold star of Infinite as a whole, and is such a really great takeaway. Started from the very beginning and honestly followed through the entire time up until, you know, this year with HCS ending in now it's technically last year of 2025 of October. So shout out to those guys and the HCS still.
Yep.
And hopefully
you guys did good work.
Whatever they can pull together again, like what Infinite was, and even better in the future. But I thought they had a phenomenal start with that. Moving on to next, I thought, and this is, again, it's multiplayer, it's going to be comp sort of blended together. The Sandbox, there, even though I did say there were a lack of some iconic things, the range of Sandbox tools still were pretty good.
It was very nice, and there was, I think that's part of why the HCS was as successful as it was. Like, the grapple shot obviously was huge. You know, the repulsor also like created so many iconic plays, and there were a lot of cool weapons. It was like, wasn't quite as good as Halo 3 maybe, but it felt like they were working back towards that like incredibly diverse, dynamic Halo 3 sandbox. And it also felt like in some ways they might be able to do better than Halo 3, just in terms of like competitive play and how interesting that was to watch.
Not amazing, but it was good. That's not to say that things weren't OP or busted or some things just didn't belong in comp, but at least from the casual start that we had, I felt like the Sandbox was pretty good. I mean, you had new additions like the Mangler, which I felt was super cool. I feel like that's almost like an iconic weapon in and of itself nowadays. It's not so fresh, but it is just something new to look at and shoot. That's just a little different than what we've seen. It's almost like a deagle of sorts, like a heavy hand cannon style, that honestly probably the H1 Combat Evolved Magnum is like one of the only other weapons that it kind of rivals.
Yeah, that's a good example. The Mangler conceptually was a cool, unique, new item weapon for all of the Halo franchise. So it's not like they had just a bunch of bad ideas. I think part of the execution and like Mangler as an example, like in the hands of pros, does it become a toxic weapon to use versus casual?
Realistically, I think in comparison, Pulse Carbine, Skewer, it's another new great weapon, Shock Rifle.
The Pulse Rifle fucking sucked when it first came out. I hated that weapon. I've always despised how 343 just has like this aversion to the plasma rifle. They don't like it for some reason, and they keep trying to switch it up with some weapon that, like the Storm Rifle, the Pulse Rifle. They're basically the same thing, just make the plasma rifle. But the shock rifle and the Skewer were different enough to like the rocket launcher and sniper that they felt like they fit in. The shock effect on the shock rifle was kind of a bit too OP for countering vehicles, but in competitive, it was one of the most entertaining weapons to watch and see in the hands of players like Lucid.
Cinder Shot, Heat Wave.
They just like never had the Cinder Shot in competitive. There were so many maps. I kept feeling like even at the last like World Championship, just as a side note, but like the Sandbox got smaller and smaller as time went on because they either took these weapons off the map or the pros agreed that they were too OP for comp. But like I can barely like maybe recall the Cinder Shot being used in a couple HCS tournaments. And the Heat Wave was cool, but they stopped using it.
Bulldog.
Same with the Bulldog.
Disruptor, the Commando, to begin with. And so there was also, the Carbine was re-added back in. That's a classic.
When did they do that? They added the Carbine? Fuck. Man, I guess I haven't been paying much attention, but that looks like a crazy-ass Carbine. I hope that's a skin.
That really should have been there from the...
That was not in HCS, so I guess, damn.
Beginning, the Mutilator, which was...
I don't even remember this weapon. When did these get added? Last time I watched or played Halo Infinite was October, so...
was a brand new shotgun, which that kind of serves almost... The Mutilator is, I would say, a tie-in of a classic shotgun that was missing from Infinite that a lot of people really wanted, but then also added a crazy melee of a gravity hammer end piece, which...
Yeah, that looked cool.
By all means, that's cool, sure.
Stalker Rifle was also cool. Like, all the precision weapons were different enough that they performed much different and weren't just like redundant aspects of the Sandbox, right? So they did fix the issue that like Halo 4, for example, had, where all the Promethean's weapons were just orange versions of guns that already existed.
Added in, that was kind of crazy, but I really liked the idea. I can get behind it. As well as the Avenger like SMG, which that was kind of a little bit more of a low key.
I never even saw this.
Well. Same thing with like the fuel rod. Those were like really...
When did they add
pretty much
these?
Every weapon, or most of these weapons besides I think the Mutilator.
Wait, also that's a Spanker fuel rod. What the hell is that? I guess they added these weapons and then didn't have them in HCS, which is so strange. I guess that shows you how long I've been out of the game.
Including the Carbine are like reworked weapon models to actually serve a, the redundancy purpose of like, it's kind of the same thing or something similar that we maybe have in the Sandbox, but it's a little bit different, which is fine. It really served a different purpose in the Sandbox still in some regard. And, those weapons being added were great, but they're just too far gone. I believe the Bandit was the first to be added.
I thought the Bandit was like the only new weapon added to the game. Yeah, because those other ones were just made from existing models, so they don't feel entirely new. Like, if you're going to add the fuel rod, why wouldn't you just, like, add the fuel rod? Why would you make it a Spanker fuel rod? But the Bandit rifle, like, why would that just not be the DMR? Yeah, that's crazy. I think they only added the DMR because the pros had, like, gotten so exhausted with using the battle rifle as much as they had. And the battle rifle had its own problems in Infinite, but
added as well, and that was just a DMR getting re-added in. And so that wasn't really like a fresh new weapon. The Avenger being, I think, the second weapon that came out, maybe year 3. I can't quite remember when it came out. That's why I said
they released a second weapon in the 3rd year. That's crazy.
Sleeper, and it never got added into comp, so it's kind of hard to say when that got added. And the same thing with the fuel rod. And then the carbine getting added in was like another one of the newer weapons that actually got used in competitive play. And all these weapons getting added in so late, so again, being reskinned, it does really take away from the wow factor of what could have been, because I feel like the wow factor is what we got with the Mutilator.
That's a very good point. Once you reuse like existing weapon models and then just kind of change their function to recreate something that existed before that used to have its own weapon model, it's kind of just feels like, oh, this is like half of a fuel rod cannon in Halo Infinite.
This is kind of a bit of a tangent. Ultimately, the Sandbox was in a pretty decent spot at the beginning of Infinite,
I would agree.
In terms of just like variety. That did kind of wear off a little bit soon.
It was fresh and it was exciting, and it, you know, coming off of Halo 5, which again, I think started adding new weapons and new wrecks like within the first month. Like the first major update added some new weapons, and I think that was the expectation when they said that this would be a live service, that it would, like, at the very least, match these sort of depth of content and features and sandbox tools that Halo 5 added. And it never even got close.
But for example, just the fact that we had BR starts in
huge
competitive Infinite, and having the iconic,
that is huge, you know, because their tendency to like change all these things about Halo that 343 may not like or believe in, you know. And the battle rifle looks like the battle rifle, you know. It wasn't like the Halo 5 battle rifle. So yeah, the right kind of nostalgia.
Not necessarily a fully realized system, and not expanded on as much as I feel like they really should have. Again, but goes back in.
Yeah, especially compared to, I don't know, a game like Marvel Rivals or any other competitive shooter that is like constantly adding new content that pleases both casual and competitive fans. I think I would honestly prefer more features and more content added that has a higher chance of being broken, overpowered, or frustrating to play against than just like very, very little changes to the core gameplay in Sandbox. I prefer experimentation over like nothing.
To a whole bunch of different other topics that we will talk about later in terms of what really needed to be fixed or better for the future. Now to kind of get in generally to what went wrong.
Yeah, now we're getting to the spicy parts
with Infinite. So to start off with, the big elephant in the room, there was no large meaningful expansions, campaign like story-wise, or major gameplay reworks. And obviously, if you're watching this video, you're still probably a pretty diehard fan. You just want to consume any sort of Halo content, and
he's
you
right.
already understand this. But so the lack of meaningful expansions hurts Halo dramatically, and it really, because Halo is supposed to be that, you know, combination of all these communities, being the campaign and multiplayer, and then you have custom games, forgers, theater people, machinima, like all these different types of communities all combined in one. Especially
when you're releasing, launching, and promoting the game as like a live service. Like Halo 5 didn't like fundamentally change the gameplay or rework the game, but you know, imagine if Fortnite played exactly the same, or if Fortnite never tried a no build mode, or it didn't try these, you know, various maps, modes, limited time features, etc. And compared to other games with the live service moniker, Halo Infinite looks like they were done with it on day one.
And Infinite, especially early on, started to leave the PvE out dramatically, even with like the sort of idea of an expanded space and more open world dynamic that they had going on in the campaign. Unfortunately, they did not want to, or they unfortunately they could not really expand on that any further.
Which is so strange because also the campaign was the thing that people had to pay for to experience. And they, like, just didn't update it at all or add any new content or features. So really just kind of like messy priorities, you know? The paid experience was not the premium experience that got the most attention. The free game was. It was also bizarre. Like, it should not have been free to play. I don't think that gave Halo Infinite. Like, it allowed a lot of people to try the game, but I think all it did was lower the studio's expectations for what they needed to deliver on day one.
And then with what they had with the multiplayer being just the bread and butter then for the longer term solution of just keeping the game alive, there was no major tune-ups for the game. Like, I mean, the biggest shakeup that we had was, I feel like, just strictly for competitive whenever we swapped to, like, bandit starts. And I feel like that was kind of it. That, and then there was a reduction in the sandbox element.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier. Yeah, go off, Lucid, go off.
It's being, at least in competitive play, but generally speaking, to keep that a little bit more general, because we'll talk about comp a little bit more later, there was not enough being added for just casual players. Playlists were still kind of dull. They're being swapped, like certain favorited playlists are being swapped in and swapped out for like timed sessions by like per week or per couple weeks. However, those like featured playlists work. And so the game just got stale. The game just got stale pretty quick. All this really stems from the false hope sort of campaign that the studio was giving off. And the studio probably had to do that really for their own sake, for their jobs, their livelihoods, to, you know, keep people invested. And they maybe even thought that they really could do more than what the reality turned out to be. But then,
yeah, I mean, Infinite ended with the promise of like an expansion because it was incomplete, right? Oh, the Endless, what's gonna happen next? It felt like they were teasing that, and now we'll never know what the Endless are, what was up with them. Why were they so endless? They're called that because you will have to wait an endless amount of time to figure that out.
And timelines really got drawn out. They got strung along and pulled apart with the idea that there's going to be more, and it's going to be more, it's going to be bigger, it's going to be better, things are going to be fixed, and we hear you, we hear the consensus, we hear the feedback, and we hear you guys. That was like a lot of what year one was.
Yeah, and so there was still hope, even like a few months, 6 months in, like, okay, you know, maybe they can turn this ship around. They listened to us on the art style, so hardcore fans like myself who do have a lot of reach and who do reach a lot of Halo fans, like I wanted to be proven wrong. You know, I wanted to be surprised by 343 and their updates, and holding out hope that was never delivered.
And things just did not change in any reasonable amount of time.
Yeah.
And so you lose a great amount of the player base immediately within the first 6 months.
I think the biggest problem with Halo Infinite was like overpromising, under-delivering, and just constant delays and radio silence and no real honest communication and so much corpo speak that in hindsight was just us being strung along in a unfulfilling relationship by someone who kept promising they were going to be better and never made the change.
And then it just tapered off, you know, more and more after, and there was still false hope, and there was still always that sort of idea of what could have been, and that's still kind of what Halo runs on nowadays.
I was about to say, he does sound like genuinely sad at this point. What he just said right there is so true. Like, Halo has been running off of what it could be for basically the entire time I've been making videos on YouTube. What Halo could be. That's what it's been running off of, and that's a crazy state. Here I am 10 years later, still talking about what it could be.
Unfortunately. Very unfortunately. That, I think, is one of the biggest takeaways of what went wrong with this game, is just a severe lack of content pipeline for a live service game that was supposed to be in, and them just kind of stringing along the community, in a sense. I feel like that really hurt them and hurt the image a lot of what Infinite had to offer. Even though, again, game launched, has some good bones.
No muscles, though.
But you can't have a fucking world star athlete with just bones. That's not how it works. You got a skeleton. Gotta have all the muscles. You gotta have everything built up.
He and I didn't watch this video, by the way, but he and I are on the same wavelength. You know what I mean?
Conditioned, just well-oiled, fine-tuned for it to be this world-class item and winner of what Halo should be and where it should be at. The bones just ain't good enough. Moving on, there was a reduction in overall iconic and potentially redundant weapons and vehicles that just did not make a return from previous Halos. Some of them being the carbine at the start, because we did get a version of the carbine by the end. Plasma rifles, railguns, nade launcher.
Railgun is also another example of like a cool, albeit overpowered and frustrating weapon that 343 came up with and then just abandoned. The grenade launcher would have been sick for Halo Infinite, though.
Even sticky detonator. Take that. Yep. That's honestly a pretty cool weapon that never came back from Halo 4.
Yep, exactly.
Fuel rod, same thing. We have a very modified version of a spanker rocket that is a fuel rod, but not truly a fuel rod. Even the brute shot or like the spiker. Some of those weapons that, especially even like thinking about it, like the brute shot and the spiker, those are brute weapons, which I feel like would be so tied to the aesthetic of like the Banished and what this game had as well.
You would think that.
There.
You would think that.
And then they even, again, by the end of it, added the sort of redundancy on the back end of the Avenger, the Bandit, I guess you could still say, in terms of like their philosophy of it being another precision weapon. The fuel rod's a rocket launcher, and then the Mutilator's another shotgun, which we already had 2 shotguns. But it's like that is what makes Halo Halo. Is you have these things, you have the extra elements, and the extra elements, even if they could be similar, they still fit into a different bucket and serve a different purpose. And if you give that different element, it is just allowing the player to experience and express themselves differently in the game, which retains people. It keeps people more interested.
Absolutely. And the other important side of this is that because it's a sandbox game and you pick up weapons on the map, developers have complete control over what weapons are on which map. So, you can cut off any redundancy just by designing your maps and your weapon placements in a smart way.
Just allows you to...
And that allows you to have a larger sandbox and weapons that might be redundant without feeling like they are, because, you could have a Covenant or Banished map with more Banished weapons than human ones.
Hopefully in the future they have the, the redundant weapons and weapon classes sort of system tossed away and just add in what makes Halo Halo. Bring back the beam rifle, like bring back any of those weapons and the ideas of older Halos. Or again, we want new stuff too, even if it's something
Focus
new,
rifle.
add it in. I'd really said the false hope was really a big thing. Biggest nail in the coffin, I think, for Infinite, at least from a competitive standpoint, but really it affected everybody, was the abysmal online experience. And it started from day one.
Fuck, here we are talking about the design of the game. Completely forgot about the desync issues and all of that. I mean, I mentioned the HCS disconnects and restarts of sets, but the game was not stable at all. And that's a whole nother dimension that recent Halo videos I barely talked about, but it was huge.
Now, let's move on to some comp-specific gripes that I had, what they did wrong. So one of the biggest obvious things is never finding a true balance of Sandbox between the comp and casual community. Created a pretty huge divide early on, and there just never really was a consensus on just about anything, because for the longest time HCS did not want to change anything. They would not listen or could not capably go into the game to alter certain things, and then, well...
And that's what's so bizarre is, like, I remember watching HCS matches and thinking, like, man, these guys aren't picking up any of the weapons on the map. And that's because all the pros had G8 or Gentleman's Agreement, a ton of weapons. And I feel like it really is just such a simple fix of, like, you can have you can have the same map, and you can have a casual and a competitive version of it, in which you can control the weapons and swap out something like the Mangler, which the pros don't want in the competitive scene. But it was like year 2 or 3, and there's still like Manglers on these competitive maps that people are competing for like $1 million, and they just didn't listen to the competitive players. And I remember thinking, like, why would they do that? I mean, it was dumb. It was stupid. Made no sense.
Casuals want one thing and comp wants another. There's no way to make, you know, a second version of the weapons, which, by the way, I feel like we should have a separate sandbox, but there's no way to rework this just for these people, so we just have to deal with it, which in turn led to what we now use as GAs. Yeah,
see, like, you haven't designed this in a way that is appropriate for the competition that we, the players, the best players, want to have, so we just, we're not going to use it, and you're not going to bother to take it off the map or rework it for our version of the game.
Which GAs, I feel like, have to be terrible, and they are terrible, to be blunt, for the viewing experience.
They were so bad, you know, and that's why I loved watching Lucid, because he would pick up a plasma pistol. He would pick up these kind of wacky weapons that not a lot of other pros would pick up, and there wasn't options for people to pick up. So the competitive scene, despite being a sandbox game, really struggled because there wasn't a sandbox to play in.
And so we just never really reached a consensus ever. Even to this day, we never really, like, they made some changes to like the heat wave or the bulldog or whatever, and some things getting removed was fine, but it's just not, it was too late, too far gone.
Yeah, and like the Mangler as an example, I mean, Halo 5 had weapon variants, Halo Infinite could have had weapon variants. You can have weapon variants. That's the beauty of Halo's design, is that it's so versatile and modular, right? You want a Mangler that is less, you know, cheesy, like one-shot melee, instant death at point-blank range, triggering Halo 4 bolt shot memories. Yeah, create a different version of it that maybe is easier to hit shots with, but does less damage and maybe slightly faster fire rate, and then give it a different cosmetic skin. Bing, bang, boom, you can now use the Mangler in competitive Halo tournaments that you are competing for $1 million.
A lot of these.
And the viewer's experience is much better because there's more variety.
Different elements. And I really, really hope in the future there is just maybe some form of, that can be the redundancy as well, because I feel like you could use what I'm going to call like pro versions, or we'll just call.
Me and him, we're on the same wavelength. We know exactly how to make Halo great.
Some Evo versions, like what we made the Bandit Evo for competitive. Like you can have a BR Evo, you can have, you know, an AR Evo. And those weapons are just like variants, like what you have, even though it won't be like crazy, fun, stupid crazy elements to the weapons, like some of the other ones that we have for casual play, which is great. That could still even be used in casual play.
Yeah.
But we need to make sure that we find a balance. And I think the easiest approach is just to have a separate sandbox of Evo versions, pro versions of the weapons. And that is probably as far as I can go right now, because I'm not going to get into specifics for specific weapons. That's not really what this video is for. It's just to kind of generally talk about the ideas of what was right and wrong. And maybe we'll talk about what I think needs to change for comp in the future, specifically in regards to like Sandbox and all that. Another big deal with competitive, really along year 4, but kind of end of year 3, was the gameplay losing its core identity with the reduction in the sandbox, like we've been talking about. New bandit meta was, especially for me, but most, was pretty welcome to have a new weapon, starting weapon, after 2 years.
2 years of just BR starts. Basically, like, you would think preseason for a game. Like, League of Legends just came out with a massive new game-changing update. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but like, you know, every role in League has basically broken the rules that have been established since the game's launch. Top laners can now get to a higher level than 18, for example. You know, stuff like that. When you want to keep a game fresh, that's what I'm saying. I'd rather experimentation versus nothing.
But this also resulted in really broken mechanics. I'm just going to flat out just call it broken mechanics in the gameplay that I think, as a viewer, as a more casual player, as a very competitive player for myself, I think most people can agree. Jiggle peaks, ghost jumps, sprint strafes, bad hit registration in online play, all of that led to a really muddied down version of what I feel like we were playing by year 2 of Infinite and what it could have been after, and just what the, like, I would even...
I'm a little confused here, because is some of this movement tech that's being shown on screen, is that not, like, cool? Do the pros not like that? Or I'm probably missing something or missing the specifics of it, but I felt like some of these little exploits that I saw when I watched pro Halo players play, it was like a less oppressive version of the BXR from Halo 2, and so like you know, seeing them pull off these little moves that maybe I never would have thought to do made watching the game more exciting. So maybe I'm just missing something here.
There was an over-reliance on forgers to keep the map content drip-fed.
Which is so crazy that, like, dog, they couldn't even... Yeah, dude, there was, like, some sanction with Russia, I think because of the Ukraine, if I'm remembering correctly, and, like, 343's map designers were all, like, based out of Russia, so they just couldn't make any maps because they didn't have any map designers that worked on Halo. I mean, that was just, like, that was baffling. I think I remember making a joke in one of my Halo videos, like, Hardy LaBelle, the multiplayer designer for Halo 1, made Rat Race in a day. Just remake Rat Race. They must have had, like, I mean, they must have laid them off or fired them or something, but there was nobody capable of making maps for Halo Infinite, and that's just crazy that you could have such, like, gaping holes in your team. But it is also kind of shitty because you're exploiting passionate fans' work and love for the game, and then utilizing that as the backbone of the live service you promised because your company is unbelievably greedy and unwilling to hire a single map designer to staff.
And there was very few.
There are actually some very, very disgusting stories about how they treated forgers. I can't recall them off the top of my head, but I saw some shit. I remember seeing some crazy shit about, like, just, well, maybe a video for another time.
Few reworks or reworkings that they were willing to do for older year one, year 2 map game type combos that just didn't show up later on. Even though they're developer made maps, we were trying to push, like, we were really trying to force in Fortress Bomb. Fortress as a whole, but Fortress Bomb. When we could have tried out Bazaar. Could have tried out.
Yeah, Bazaar was taken out of the competitive scene. They just didn't rework it. Like it's so weird. It's so bizarre. Like this game had like a skeleton staff after launch. I'll never understand how this project was mismanaged to such wild degrees.
Catalyst, again, those maps definitely needed reworks. It would not be and should not be like how year 1, year 2 layouts were.
It's a live service game. Change the maps. Rework them. Fuck it. Halo 5 did that too. They had reworked versions of existing maps. And yes, they did use that to say like, oh, we're launching with 20 maps, but 12 of them are reworks. But like, they didn't even try that, man.
But it's like, we're really trying to force in, I'm going to be blunt, really not the prettiest, just pretty ugly Forge maps that doesn't fit Halo and what a Halo map is at all. Again, I'm sorry, but I'm going to be blunt. And
he's talking about competitive play, like, so those Forge maps do not fit in as well at the highest level than dev-made maps. And so them relying on that as a crutch for the game's most premier, competitive, high-octane, like, essentially the most exciting version of the game, and having to rely on, like, free labor to support that is just, it's fucking wild to me.
Have these really beautiful and great looking developer maps that we are just not trying to use at all.
They were beautiful.
And it's honestly shocking. Like, I just don't know why. I don't know why they were so against it. Because people hated Fortress at the end of the day. Even competitive players, most competitive players hated Fortress. It's like, I'm sure we could have probably figured out a way for Catalyst, like bomb on Catalyst to work, or just bring back Flag, and both of those. I still think, again, reworks on Bazaar would have been great too. There had to be some way to just keep maybe the developer pipeline of what at least was good, was at least pretty good, if not good, and closer to great aesthetically, and then even just fundamentally of how the game, the maps play. Keep that in competitive play as much as we could. Streets.
We're talking about the developer pipeline. It feels like the plumbing was leaking everywhere, and they never brought in replacement pipes for the plumbing. That's a good analogy for like the live service support of Halo Infinite. They forgot to change the busted pipes.
Hill, Streets, Strongholds, really busted. Year 1, and I don't remember if it came out in year 2, if it got pulled. Street Strongholds at least. And it was like, once the spikes and shocks got nerfed, like both Bazaar and Streets should have had a green light on, we should be testing this. and that just never came back. But again, we got Solitude, we got Interference, we ended up getting Origin. They're just all H5 Forge maps. Also, again, not brand new maps. Lattice at least was a mixy kind of new map. People were still learning it.
Bro, remember that map launch site? Holy fuck, I totally forgot about that. That was so weird. It was like a BTB, it was like asymmetrical BTB, but for 4v4, it was so weird. They never reworked that either, man. They just didn't work on this game after they released it.
Super late into year 4. It took them that long to finally get a new, like, you know, Oddball, Hill, Strongholds map as well, ASIM new map, because we were just throwing in old maps that just really don't play that well in Infinite, because they aren't made for Infinite in terms of the
yeah, it's just radical incompetence.
Scaling, especially. They are okay. Like, Solitude is okay. Plaza is okay, I'd say, as a whole. I feel like Strongholds on the map was pretty bad. Interference, kind of the same thing. Like, it was, like, okay, but not really that great. And on top of that, the visual aesthetics, I feel like the one map that really stands out to me is Origin for Coliseum. Forger on that map put a lot of effort into actually beautifying it, which I really
that looks like Forge World right there
for that, because it really turned out great. Thought the map honestly played pretty well as well. It's a symmetrical map, so I feel like it's kind of hard to go wrong, even if it's not Halo 5. So, you know, that was definitely a pretty solid addition back into Halo Infinite, was bringing that back. The fact that these things are trying to get strong-armed in so much, and they really are not good enough. Okay, well, let's bring in the maps that are literally designed for the game. Again, Bazaar, Catalyst, Streets. Figure out a way to rework them, make some new maps that are designed with the game that we are currently playing in mind. Finally, for comp,
it is baffling that they, you know, I guess I'm not a competitive Halo player. I'm a huge fan of Halo, but in terms of like how hard I try to be good at Halo, I would be considered a casual. But it is kind of crazy to think like, okay, the competitive side of Halo was the most supported, and yet they still seem to have not listened to the pro players like at all. So they didn't listen to casual players, competitive players, or the pros. And I'm just wondering, like, what was the live service creative direction for this game? I struggle to even understand what it was.
The LAN performance of just the, you know, the specs, the PCs, all of that was pretty bad, especially for the first 2 years. But
talking about the rigs they had to play on for $1 million, they weren't good enough. Okay, that's crazy. Keep cooking.
But even then, still through year 3, and then it got pretty consistent by year 4, like very little crashing by year 4. It is just an absolute no. Like, you cannot let, I think Raleigh was so cool and so great, but also so terrible.
Yeah.
Most of, I think, Friday was just like a wash of like and then we had to play on Xboxes for 2 events.
Yeah, it was really bad. And, you know, there were so many people watching it, and I remember just like seeing comments on streams and whatnot and just be like, God, get your shit together. Come on, you can't be fucking this up right now. This is like, it's like your big chance. So I'm glad he brought up Raleigh, because I did go to that and it was very exciting. But man, I started to physically cringe at that event by like the 8th set restart, the 8th disconnect, and it just it took so much hype out of the competitive scene at that point, which did get revived later as the game started to work a bit better. But yeah, it's just like everything that could go wrong did go wrong.
Which is pretty crazy. The performance on LAN from those was, and it goes back to a broader, like, performance as a whole on this game has really been, and still is to this day, like a mystery of like, it is just not great. It is really bad. Your PC is like, your CPU is like getting fried running this game, pretty much.
I remember there was like some glitch that would download like tens of gigabytes of just like the same background image to your PC, and that's why the game like struggled to load for one season. It was just weird shit, man. 343's never been able to really optimize their games, huh? It's always some weird shit going on.
They gotta dial that in. There's just a lot of things where it's like, it just needs the proper amount of time, which is crazy. They had 6 years for Infinite, and there were still all these issues. And I really do hope for the future of whatever is next for Halo multiplayer, you know, they can really dial it in and really clutch up.
They can. What Halo could be, right, folks? And this does kind of make me sad hearing him of all people say this sort of thing, because like the future of Halo multiplayer, we have no idea or indication of what that might be, and we are 5 years out from Infinite, and a campaign evolved, a CE remake is what we got in the pipeline, and
need them to clutch up for the future of this game and this franchise. That sums up my thoughts on what Infinite did right and wrong. Unfortunately, there is probably a lot more wrong to talk about, or
Yeah.
again, littered throughout, even through some of the right stuff that we were talking about. It's kind of hard to not talk about what also went wrong. Two sides of the same coin, just easy to flip-flop in between. But I can't thank this game and, you know, Halo Studios now, 343 at the time, enough for still supporting me and the community and giving me a platform, allowing me to create my own platform on it. As the one thing, again, that I can really appreciate. So thank you to you guys as well.
I can agree with that.
And if you're still here in the video, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you all on the next one. Later.
All right, fellas. Make sure you give our boy Lucid a like on this video and subscribe to him. Link will be in the description, pinned comment. That was a great video, and it was very interesting to hear his perspective on what happened to Halo Infinite. A lot of things, you know, I think he and I really agree on, and we're at kind of yet another weird point in the Halo franchise life cycle where there's so much uncertainty and we just don't know what's coming. The CE remake just kind of feels like an afterthought at this point. It's really like it's not enough, and you know, it's bittersweet because there was a lot good about Infinite, but all that potential was squandered, and they've essentially, you know, quit on the game. You know, all these pro players, I really do feel for them, putting so much into this game, trying to be the best you can possibly be, and just never fully receiving the support you deserve from the company that you're playing your heart for. What happened to Halo Infinite? They just fired all their employees or something. I don't know. They just stopped working on the game pretty much. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like. Hope you enjoyed. We got a couple React Man videos, you know. I like reacting. Lucid's great, and yeah, make sure you subscribe and like his video. So, all right, everyone, that's all I got for today. This is the Act Man signing out. Peace.